Most people believe the hero's journey begins out there in the world in success and conquest. But what if the real journey begins within? In this video, you'll be taken on a cinematic descent into the depths of your own psyche. Guided by Jungian wisdom, you'll confront the unconscious, meet your shadow, face the archetypes that shape you, and awaken the true self buried beneath your masks. This isn't motivation, it's transformation. The hero's journey begins not with glory, but with inner death and rebirth. And it begins now. There comes a moment in every life where the silence grows loud, where the noise of the world dims just enough for you to hear something ancient stirring beneath your thoughts. It is not a voice in words, but a call in symbols, not a map but a myth. You feel it like a tremor in the soul, subtle, haunting, undeniable. This is the moment the hero's journey begins, not in distant lands, but within. For the true dragons are not out there, they coil beneath your ribs. The treasure you seek is buried beneath your fear. And the real path starts when you close your eyes and see what you've spent a lifetime avoiding. Most people never answer this call. They drown it in distraction, sedate it with comfort, suffocate it with obligation. But if you're still listening, if your breath has slowed and your chest is tight, then perhaps you're ready not for answers, but for the descent. The unconscious is not a void. It is a living ocean, and you are not separate from it. You are its surface. Beneath every opinion, every plan, every polished persona, is a storm of symbols, traumas, urges, forgotten gods, and fractured masks. Carl Jung called this the unconscious, not because it is lifeless, but because it is too alive, too chaotic, too overwhelming to let in all at once. So we build walls. We call those walls me. We decorate them with achievements, polish them with politeness, and defend them like our lives depend on it. But the self, the true self, lives beyond those walls. And it is knocking, not gently, not politely. It knocks through dreams, through breakdowns, through the sudden feeling that everything you've built is hollow. And so begins the descent, not into madness, but into meaning. Not into darkness, but into depth. To descend is to confront the shadow, that dark twin you've cast behind you in your race toward light. The parts of you you've disowned, your rage, your envy, your weakness, your sexuality, your selfishness, your hunger for power. But the shadow is not evil. It is exiled. And what is exiled returns with vengeance. Every time you deny it, it grows fangs. Every time you repress it, it learns to manipulate. The shadow does not disappear. It waits. It waits in projection, in passive aggression, in addiction, in blame. You do not conquer it. You bow to it. You look it in the eye and say, I see you. You are mine. For what you own cannot own you, and only what you integrate can become power. The man who makes peace with his shadow becomes dangerous, but in the way a sword becomes holy when wielded by the just. But the shadow is only the gatekeeper. Beyond it lies the realm of archetypes, those eternal patterns etched into the soul of the species. You are not just a name or a personality. You are the echo of myths that have never died. The warrior, the lover, the magician, the king, the child, the mother, the trickster, the destroyer. They live in. You speak through you, act through you when you are unconscious. They are not stories, they are structures. When you feel an instinct, you cannot explain an emotion that is older than you. It is often an archetype rising. Most people live possessed by them. But to become conscious of them is to ride the lion instead of being devoured by it. The archetype of the hero, too, lives within. And it is he who answers the call, not the ego. Your ego trembles at dissent. It clings to certainty. But the hero in you was made for this storm. He knows the path is found by walking straight into the unknown. The next descent is deeper still, into the anima, the soul image. If you are a man, she appears in your dreams as seductress, goddess mother, witch. If you are a woman, the animus comes as tyrant savior, judge lover. These are not just fantasies. They are mirrors. They reveal how you relate to the depths of your own being, to the opposite within. Most people marry their projections and then blame their partners when the illusion dies. But the real task is inward marriage. To face the anima is to wrestle with your emotional chaos, your longing for wholeness, your deep unmet needs. She is beauty and terror. She offers transformation, but only if you stop chasing her in the world and turn toward her within. Integration of the anima is not romance, it is revolution. For she does not want your love, she wants your surrender, and in surrender, she reveals your soul. What comes next is death, not of the body, but of the mask, the persona, that polite professional filtered self you've crafted for applause. It served you, it helped you belong. But it is not you, and it will not survive the underworld. This is the most terrifying moment of the journey. Not the dragons, not the darkness, but the silence. After your old self dies and nothing yet has taken its place, you are no one. You are naked before the self. And this is holy. Do not run from it. Do not rebuild the mask. Let it fall. Let it rot. You are being undone to be remade. The persona was a cage gilded in compliments, but the self is the sun. Face the shadow. Find the self. There is a place within you where the light refuses to shine. A hidden chamber behind the facade, behind the smiles, behind every polite nod and well-practiced sentence. It is not evil, it is not broken. It is simply unseen, and what is unseen begins to rot. The modern world teaches us to sanitize ourselves to be likable, productive, clean. But in doing so, we bury the rawness of who we are. The rage that once protected us, the grief that never had time to cry, the hunger, the lust, the resentment, the wild and sacred madness that once made us whole. This is the shadow. It is not your enemy. It is your exiled twin, the part of your psyche you were forced to abandon in order to belong. And it waits, not quietly, not passively. It whispers in dreams, in slips of the tongue, in compulsions you cannot explain. It lives in the way you sabotage what you love, in the way you envy what you admire, in the way you fear, for the very thing that could set you free. You do not outgrow the shadow. You either face it or you become it, unconsciously, destructively, unknowingly. And so the work begins. The descent is not comfortable. It is not Instagrammable. It does not flatter the ego. It strips it. Jung called this process enantiodromia, the turning of things into their opposites. What you repress will emerge. What you ignore will grow teeth. The more you chase goodness, the more darkness you leave behind, and the more it hungers for you. But the shadow is not just darkness. It is energy raw, primal, transformative. It is your disowned life force. Inside the shadow is everything you could be if you stopped pretending to be who you're not. The anger you fear holds your boundaries. The envy you deny hides your desire. The shame you carry conceals your deepest values. You were not meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole. And wholeness requires integration. It requires sitting with what terrifies you, listening to the parts of you you were taught to hate, holding your own inner demon and realizing it looks a lot like a wounded child. This is not self-help. This is self-confrontation. Every culture has a myth of the underworld. Osiris dismembered, Inanna descending naked through 7 gates. Christ in the tomb. Persephone stolen by Hades, and always the pattern is the same descent, death, rebirth. The hero does not slay the monster, he merges with it. The goddess does not escape the dark, she becomes queen of it. The gold is never in the temple, it is in the belly of the beast, and the beast is your shadow. To face it is to die not physically, but psychologically. To let go of who you think you are. To be devoured by something older than thought, and to emerge not as someone new, but as someone true. This is not a metaphor, it is a process. And it begins with honesty. Not the kind you post, the kind you whisper to yourself when no one is watching. The kind that trembles as it rises, the kind that confesses, I am not okay, I am not whole. But I want to be your dreams. Know what your mind denies. The symbols you see at night are not random. They are messages. A snake in a hallway. A flooded house. A faceless man in the mirror. Each image a clue. Each archetype, a fragment of your soul trying to return. Jung believed that dreams were the royal road to the unconscious and the language of the soul. But we treat them like static nonsense. Yet when you learn to read the language of dreams, you begin to see that nothing is meaningless. The shadow speaks in symbols. It shows up not to scare you, but to guide you. The more terrifying the dream, the more important the message. A monster chasing you is a part of you. You're running from. A broken bridge is a connection lost. A fire consuming your childhood home is the beginning of transformation. But you must be brave enough to feel what the dream reveals. You must not analyze from a distance. You must enter the image. You must feel the fear, the awe, the grief, the hunger. For only through feeling can the unconscious become conscious. And only what is made conscious can be healed. The truth about your dark side. There is a side of you that you were never taught to love. A side you were trained to silence, to disguise, to exile, in the name of being good, being normal, being accepted, and yet it lives on in your thoughts, in your triggers, in your habits, in your dreams. This is the part of you that doesn't obey, that feels too much, wants too deeply, resents too sharply, hungers too wildly. It is your dark side, not a flaw, but a force. Not a sin, but a secret. Not a mistake, but a mirror, Jung called it. The shadow. And the truth is, if you have never met your shadow, then it is living your life for you. It speaks through the masks you wear. It acts through the patterns you deny. It feeds on your wounds and dresses itself in your virtues. Because what you repress doesn't disappear, it waits. It sharpens its claws in silence. It feeds in the dark corners of your psyche. And when it breaks free, it does not knock. It erupts. It shatters. It takes what it is owed. You cannot outrun the shadow. You can only face it. But facing it is not a casual act. It is not a weekend retreat or a self-help checklist. It is a crucifixion. A reckoning. It demands that you descend deep below your opinions, your beliefs, your social armor. It demands that you stand naked in front of everything you pretend not to be. The rage you suppress to be liked, the jealousy you hide to be kind, the lust you disown to be spiritual, the superiority you deny to be humble. These are not anomalies. They are ingredients of your wholeness. You were not born to be pure. You were born to be real, and real means raw. Real means feeling the entire spectrum of your humanity. Real means burning through the illusions you inherited about who you're supposed to be. The shadow is the fire that purifies. It is the darkness that demands light, not as decoration, but as transformation. You do not integrate your shadow by thinking about it. You integrate it by becoming intimate with your contradictions. Every myth, every sacred story carries this truth. The hero must fall before he can rise. The goddess must descend before she can rule. The monster is never truly defeated. It is embraced. Hercules had to face the Hydra. Buddha had to face Mara Christ, had to descend into hell. These are not just ancient tales, they are psychological maps. They tell us that the path to wholeness does not bypass the dark, it moves through it. It teaches us that divinity is not found in perfection, but in integration, that you do not become wise by avoiding suffering, but by descending into it and discovering who you are. Beneath the pain, the shadow is your teacher. It is the part of you that refuses to be ignored. And the more you reject it, the more it possesses you. The person who claims to have no darkness is the most dangerous of all, for they are ruled by what they cannot see. And yet, facing the shadow is not about glorifying your darkness. It is not about indulging in your wounds or drowning in your pain. It is about listening, really listening to what your darkness is trying to say. It is the part of you that remembers. It remembers every time you were shamed, rejected, unloved, unheard. It carries the truth you were never allowed to speak, the boundaries you were never allowed to hold, the grief you never gave yourself permission to feel. Your shadow is a graveyard of truths buried alive. And now they rise, not to punish you, but to free you, to remind you that healing is not becoming better. It is becoming whole. And wholeness includes every part of you that the world taught you to fear. How to die before you die. How do you die before you die? You begin by descending into the silence beneath your noise, the darkness beneath your performance, the aching hollowness behind the smile you've worn so long you forgot it was a mask. You begin not by climbing, but by falling. Falling inward past the illusions that dressed themselves as truth, past the accolades that felt like nourishment, but left you starving past the identity you were taught to wear like armor, unaware it was also a cage. This is not death of the body. It is the death of the false self, the death of the obedient persona, crafted for applause, approval, and survival. It is the quiet assassination of who you thought you had to be, so that the one you truly are can begin to stir beneath the rubble of your conditioning. Carl Jung once said, "Enlightenment does not come from imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And so this is not a path of light, but of fire. The fire that scorches illusion, the fire that cracks the shell of your ego open, the fire that reveals the shadow you have tried to outrun for decades. To die before you die is to turn around and face the very thing you've spent your entire life avoiding, the unknown within. That trembling infinite wilderness, that abyss of desire, fear, rage, instinct, memory, and myth that you call your unconscious. It is not evil. It is not chaotic. It is you untamed, unspoken, and unacknowledged. The first step into the underworld of the psyche is always betrayal. You will be called to betray who you are supposed to be, to shatter the mirror that reflects only what others want from you. You must walk away from the familiar, away from roles, routines, and personas, until you find yourself alone in the wilderness of your soul. This is exile, sacred exile, the place where the hero is born. And you must become the hero now. Not the victorious warrior the world glorifies, but the inner hero, the one who dares to face their own unconscious and not turn away. And so, you enter the cave, that ancient place in myth and dream. The cave is the womb of transformation, but also the tomb of the ego inside. You will meet what Jung called the shadow. Everything you've denied, rejected, hidden, or feared about yourself. It is the unacknowledged twin, the dark double, the wounded God within. Your rage, your envy, your lust, your cowardice, your hunger for power, your secret shame, but also your creativity, your intuition, your animal instinct, your buried truth. The shadow is not evil. It is simply unloved. And to integrate it is to reclaim your full psychic inheritance. It is not about destroying the darkness, but dancing with it until it leads you back to your soul. To die before you die is to let this shadow speak, to feel it surge up in dreams and fantasies, in triggers and projections. You will see it in others first, hating what reminds you of yourself, but the real work begins when you realize the thing you despise is out there as the voice you've silenced in here. And when you finally stop running, when you sit in the discomfort, breathe through the fear, and allow that voice to rise without judgment, you will begin to hear something ancient, something primal, something sacred. You will begin to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. From the depths of this confrontation comes the archetype of the anima or animus, the soul image of the opposite within. Every man carries a hidden feminine. Every woman a hidden masculine. These are not gender roles. They are psychological truths, symbols of integration, wholeness, and inner balance. If you are a man, the anima may appear in dreams as the mysterious woman, the muse, the seductress, or the goddess beckoning you inward, calling you to soften, to feel, to surrender control, and listen to the voice of the heart. If you are a woman, the animus may appear as the wise man, the tyrant, the warrior, or the magician, urging you to step into power, to assert truth, to speak without apology, and act without fear. To unite with this inner figure is to dissolve the inner war between doing and being, logic and emotion, strength and vulnerability. It is the sacred marriage, the hieros gamos, the union of opposites that births a deeper self. But this union cannot happen while your identity clings to egoic certainty. You must die again and again and again. Each death peeling back another layer of illusion, each death burning away another lie. You must lose your old gods, your childhood myths, your inherited truths. You must wander the desert of not knowing, of questioning everything, until one day something ancient and fierce rises from within. Not an answer, but a presence. This presence is what Jung called the self, not your personality, not your ego, but the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious, light and dark, mortal and divine. The self is the silent center, the axis around which your psyche spins. It is symbolized in dreams as the mandala, the sun, the wise old man or woman, the eternal child, the sacred tree, the golden king, the divine mother. It is the God image within you, the still voice that whispers not what you want, but who you are. And to approach it is to feel both terror and awe, because to meet the self is to realize you were never in control. You were being led by dreams, by synchronicities, by symbols and symptoms, led to this moment, this death, this awakening, the monster in your mirror. Every morning you stare into the mirror and see a face you've grown used to, but you do not see the truth. You see a version of yourself curated by years of survival. The practiced expression, the socially acceptable disguise, the arrangement of traits and tones designed not to reflect your soul, but to protect it. You call it you, but it is not you. It is your persona, your psychic armor, polished for performance, sculpted for survival. And behind it, just behind the glint of your gaze, crouches something darker, something older, something waiting. You do not want to see it. You were never taught how, but it watches you, patient, silent. And sometimes it moves in your anger, in your envy, in your cruelty, your fear, your fantasies. It slips through uninvited. The monster in your mirror is not a stranger. It is the part of you you've exiled, repressed, denied. And the more you reject it, the stronger it becomes. That is the paradox of the shadow. Carl Jung did not speak of monsters as metaphors. He knew them to be real, psychic forces, autonomous fragments of your own soul, fragmented through trauma and banished into the unconscious. The monster is not evil. It is misunderstood. It is your power, your hunger, your pain, your potential, all twisted by neglect. It howls not because it is wicked, but because it has been silenced, and it will show itself. In projections, in relationships, in self-sabotage, in dreams, soaked in blood and teeth, it will surface when you lash out, when you break down, when you collapse under the weight of your own perfection. It is the creature born the moment you decided certain emotions were too much, certain truths too shameful, certain instincts too wild to be seen. The monster grows in shadow, not because it feeds on darkness, but because you refuse to feed it light. To face it is not to destroy it, but to listen, to descend into yourself, not with judgment, but with courage, to trace your rage to its root, your fear to its wound, your jealousy to its source. Every monster is a message in disguise. Every scream is a soul fragment calling you home. But to hear it, you must be willing to shatter the mirror, to let the image you defend collapse, to see the grotesque, the unlovable, the terrifying, within, not out there in the villains of the world, but in here, in the corners of your own psyche, where light has never touched. This is the true journey, the inner descent, the path the ancients called catabasis, the underworld walk, where the hero meets the beast not to slay it, but to know it. This is the myth beneath all myths, the labyrinth of the soul, the trial of fire, the confrontation that breaks you open, so something deeper can be born. In your modern life, it comes in subtler forms, the panic attack you can't explain, the obsession you can't control, the numbness that spreads like fog over your joy. These are not dysfunctions. They are symptoms of disconnection from the parts of yourself you abandoned to be good, to be loved, to be accepted. The monster in your mirror is not your enemy. It is the guardian of your truth. And it will not let you pass until you bow to it, until you admit, I am not who I pretend to be. I am rage, I am lust, I am terror, I am desire, I am the child who wasn't held. I am the teenager who had to perform, I am the adult who cannot feel safe without control. And as you say this, something shifts. The monster blinks, its jaw relaxes, its claws lower. It does not vanish. It begins to transform, because you have stopped lying to yourself. You have looked into the abyss and refused to look away. What you call darkness is often only disowned light. Your creativity hides in your rebellion. Your vitality hides in your rage. Your empathy hides in your grief. The parts you were told were too much, too loud, too soft, too strange. They are the keys to your individuation, not in their raw form, but in their integration. Jung called this process the union of opposites to become whole. You must embrace your contradiction. You are not just light, you are also shadow. And in the tension between them, the self is born. But the self does not arrive with fanfare. It arrives like a whisper, like a dream you almost forget, like a memory from another life. It speaks not in logic, but in symbol, in image, in myth. And you must learn to read its language, the language of dreams of art, of instinct, of synchronicity, the language that modern life has buried beneath screens and schedules. This is why the monster is sacred. It speaks that language fluently. It bypasses your reason, your excuses, your spiritual bypassing, and drags you back into your body, your emotions, your unfinished stories. The monster is not here to destroy you. It is here to initiate you. But first it must test you. It must terrify you. It must rip from your hands the mask you've glued to your face. Only then can you face it not as a victim, but as a sovereign. And in that moment, when you stop running, when you stop blaming, when you stop hiding and meet its eyes, you will see your reflection not as a monster, but as a mirror. And behind it, the self will rise. Not perfect, not pure, but whole. The self wants to awaken. There is something inside you that will not sleep. You have silenced it with routine, buried it beneath your roles, starved it with distraction, but still it stirs, still it watches, still it waits. The self wants to awaken, not the self you crafted for the world. The one that smiles, achieves, conforms. That one is the persona, the well-dressed ghost of your survival instinct. The self is older, wiser, more dangerous. It is not interested in success or safety. It is interested in wholeness. And wholeness demands a reckoning. It begins not with ambition, but with disillusionment, with the slow crumbling of the life you thought would fulfill you, with the unbearable realization that the ladder you've been climbing is leaned against the wrong wall, that the world you adapted to was built to keep you asleep. And suddenly the numbness breaks, the cracks appear. The dream of who you were supposed to be dissolves in silence, and from the depths of that silence the self speaks, not in words, but in symbols, in dreams that haunt you, in restlessness that cannot be named, in a quiet ache that no achievement can soothe. The self does not shout, it does not demand, it calls, and the call is subtle, terrifying, sacred. It asks you to descend into your own unconscious, into the forgotten myth of your own soul. It asks you to meet the shadow, the wounded, rejected parts of you that you buried to become acceptable, the ones who still weep in your nightmares, who scream through your addictions, who bleed into your relationships. They are not mistakes. They are lost children, banished gods. They carry your fire, your intuition, your genius, your aliveness. And the self will not awaken fully until you bring them home. This is the path of individuation, not perfection, not enlightenment, but integration. The willingness to see all of yourself, to stop dividing the sacred from the profane, to stop pretending your darkness is not yours. The path is not upward, but downward, down into the labyrinth of your own psyche, where archetypes move like tectonic plates and forgotten memories whisper through the cracks. You will not find comfort there. You will find truth, and the truth will break you open. Because to awaken the self is to lose your excuses, to lose your identity, to stand naked before your own soul and ask, who am I beneath all this noise? And when you ask sincerely, the psyche responds, not with logic, but with symbol. You begin to dream again. The dreams become strange, raw, luminous. You see animals, gods, dead ancestors, infinite staircases, oceans that swallow you whole. These are not nonsense. They are messages. The unconscious does not speak in language. It speaks in image. And every image is a doorway. Every nightmare a key. The self is reaching out, pulling you toward something older than memory, toward the sacred center you've forgotten but never lost. You begin to feel it in your bones, the truth that you are not just a name, a job, a story. You are a vessel of opposites, masculine and feminine chaos and order, innocence and savagery. To awaken is not to purify yourself of one half, but to hold both like a chalice. The anima and animus arise inner figures who guide you toward union. The anima softens your defenses, opens you to emotion, mystery, and soul. The animus strengthens your will, sharpens your clarity, pushes you toward truth. They dance within you, seeking balance, speaking through fantasy, longing intuition. They are not mere psychological functions, they are archetypal forces, sacred echoes of ancient gods, and they demand your attention. As you descend further, you realize your suffering was never random. Your symptoms were signals. Your breakdowns were initiation. You were never falling apart. You were being restructured. Your psyche was clearing the ruins of who you were, not to make space for the one you are. This is why the self waits, because it cannot awaken while you are still loyal to the lie, while you still seek validation from systems that thrive on your disconnection, while you still worship masks and fear silence. The self will not enter a house built on denial. It burns that house down and waits in the ashes. And when you finally stop resisting, when you surrender, not in defeat but in reverence, something ancient begins to rise, something that remembers the forest, the stars, the blood rites, the primal songs you once knew before language named you. This is not regression, it is remembrance. You are not becoming someone new. You are returning to someone eternal. The self is not your personality, it is your essence. It is the seed of the divine, buried in your mortal skin. It is the blueprint of your totality beyond judgment, beyond polarity. And when it awakens, your life becomes myth. Not in the grandiosity of ego, but in the quiet power of meaning. Every struggle becomes a trial, every heartbreak a portal, every moment a message. You were never just one person. You were never just one person. You only learned to pretend. From the moment you first cried out into a world too large and too loud, you began to fragment to survive. You shaped yourself into what they needed. The obedient child, the achiever, the caretaker, the rebel, the silent one. The one who smiles even when something inside is screaming. And each of these masks, each temporary identity became a little god you bowed to, not because you were weak, but because you were wise, because a part of you knew, if I am to be loved, I must become what they can handle. You did not lie. You adapted, but adaptation always comes with a price. You forgot that beneath the roles, the personas, the polished projections, you were never singular. You were a constellation of selves, mythic, wild, eternal. And the journey now is not to become someone else, but to remember the multitude inside you, the warrior and the poet, the orphan and the king, the seducer, the priestess, the destroyer, the healer. You are not a character, you are a chorus, and it is time to bring them all home. The modern world taught you that consistency is virtue, that to shift, to contradict, to feel differently today than you did yesterday is a flaw. But the soul is not linear. The psyche is not a machine. It is an ecosystem, a living mythological terrain, where countless archetypes dwell, each with their own voice, their own longing, their own sacred task. And when you silence them, when you force them into exile to maintain an image, they do not die. They rebel. They erupt through the cracks in your composure, through dreams you can't explain, through moods that don't match your story, through desires that terrify you. You say, "This isn't me." But it is. It always was. It is the part of you you could not be when you needed to be good. Jung called this fragmentation the great inner war. the battle between who we think we are and who we truly are. And in that war, the true self becomes a ghost, haunting the corridors of your life with signs and symbols. It speaks through the tension in your chest, the dull ache behind your eyes, the restlessness you feel in rooms filled with people who don't see you. It does not want you to destroy your personas. It wants you to see through them, to realize they are costumes, not prisons, tools, not truths. You were never just one person. You were always many, and each part carries a piece of your wholeness. To begin the journey back is to descend into the mythic underworld of your own unconscious, to meet one by one the selves you left behind, the angry child who never got to speak, the sensual one who was shamed, the visionary who was mocked, the trickster who was locked away. They are waiting, not for judgment, but for recognition. For you to say, I see you, I remember, you belong. And as you do, a strange alchemy begins. What felt chaotic begins to feel sacred. What once seemed monstrous reveals its wisdom. The inner cacophony becomes a choir. This is the path of individuation, not becoming perfect, but becoming whole. And wholeness is messy, divine, incomplete, alive. You begin to walk differently through the world, not as an image, but as a presence. You no longer need to defend who you are, because you are no longer trying to be only one thing. You allow your sadness to speak, your rage to roar, your love to swell without condition. You are not possessed by your moods, nor do you suppress them. You hold them like the ocean holds waves. You become a vessel vast enough for contradiction. And this is freedom. Not the absence of struggle, but the permission to be fully human, fully alive, fully you. The mythic figures awaken. The inner archetypes stir. You feel the hero within. You rise not to conquer, but to confront. To look into the eyes of your fear and see your forgotten power. The inner mother cradles your wounds. The inner father restores your spine. The inner child laughs again. The magician returns with symbols in his hands. The lover breathes passion back into your bones. You did not find them. They were always there, waiting for the moment you would stop pretending to be just one person and begin the great return to your soul. How to become who you truly are. To become who you truly are, you must first unlearn everything they told you had to be. You were born into a world that did not ask who you were. It told you your name, your gender, your worth. Told you what to worship, what to fear, what to chase, and what to hide. And like soft clay in the hands of unseen potters, you were molded into a shape that could survive. But survival is not the same as truth, and conformity is not the same as wholeness. Deep within you, beneath the masks, beneath the armor, beneath the personality you wear, like skin, something older is stirring. Something sacred, something buried under years of obedience, the self. Not the self that performs, but the self that is. And the journey of becoming begins the moment you stop asking, who do they want me to be? And start asking, who have I always been beneath the noise? The answer does not come from the mind. The mind is a master of illusion, trained to please, to analyze, to strategize. The true answer lives in the body, in the breath, in the dream. It pulses beneath your thoughts, like a forgotten drumbeat, waiting for you to be still long enough to hear it. Carl Jung called this journey individuation, the process by which a person becomes the one they are meant to be. Not by striving upward, but by descending inward. Not by adding more, but by stripping away. To individuate is to walk into the forest of your own soul with no map, no destination, and no guarantee of return. It is to trade comfort for truth, security for authenticity, image for essence. You cannot become who you are while you are still loyal to your persona. The persona is the mask you wear to survive. the face you show the world, curated to win love and avoid rejection. But every mask hides a wound, and behind every smile is a silence. To break this illusion is to risk being seen, truly seen, not for your achievements, your talents, or your charm, but for your raw humanity, for the brokenness you carry like a secret, for the beauty that does not need to be explained. To become who you are, you must shatter the persona, peel it off. Layer by layer, feel the vulnerability rise like a storm, and let it wash you clean. What waits beneath is the shadow. The part of you that was exiled when you chose to be acceptable. The anger, the desire, the fear, the grief, the wildness. You were taught to hide it, to fear it, to shame it. But the shadow is not your enemy. It is your unlived life, your hidden gold. To reject it is to stay fragmented. To embrace it is to begin the alchemy of the soul Jung wrote. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And so you go into the cave, you face the monster in your mirror, you listen to the voice you tried to silence. You let it speak, you let it rage, you let it weep, and slowly, painfully, truthfully, you begin to integrate. This integration awakens the archetypes within you. Not characters in a story, but eternal forces embedded in your psyche. The hero who longs to conquer fear, the lover who aches to merge. The wise one who waits in stillness, the orphan who cries for belonging, the trickster who disrupts the game. They are not separate. They are you. And each has a lesson, a gift, a wound to heal. To walk the path of individuation is to welcome them all, to let the inner pantheon rise in dream and instinct, in synchronicity and symbol. You become not a fixed identity, but a living myth, not a name but a flame. You are danced spoken, moved by something deeper than logic, something older than thought. Individuation is not optional. Individuation is not optional. It is not a luxury for the spiritually curious. It is not a hobby for seekers or a side quest for those with time to spare. It is the soul's mandate. It is the silent law written into the bones of your being. You came into this world with a blueprint, an inner code, a myth that only you can live. And until you begin to walk that myth, life will remain flat, anxious, repetitive, numb. You may distract yourself. You may build empires of achievement, surround yourself with beauty, with comfort, with validation. But something within will remain restless. A quiet discontent, a haunting ache. Because the self is not interested in comfort, it is interested in truth, and truth does not negotiate. It waits, and when it is ignored long enough, it begins to dismantle the life you built without it. The breakdown is not the failure. It is the invitation to begin, not upward into light, but downward into the depths, into the unconscious, into the dream world you've dismissed as nonsense, into the shadow you've labeled dangerous, into the wounds you wrapped in silence. To individuate is to surrender to this descent, not as a punishment, but as a passage. It is the initiation you were never given. The ancient rite modern culture forgot, but your psyche remembers. It sends you symbols, synchronicities, subtle patterns, repeating like echoes. It sends you symptoms, depression, rage, anxiety, not to harm you, but to awaken you. They are not malfunctions, they are messages. They will not stop until you listen. Because the self is not a whisper, it is a fire. You were born whole. But wholeness is not simplicity. It is complexity held in harmony. Masculine and feminine, light and dark, animal and divine. The child, the parent, the elder, the rebel, all living within. You aching to be known, not conquered. You learned early which parts were welcome and which parts were dangerous. So you split, you buried your depth to survive the surface. But every exile leaves a scar, every silencing creates a shadow. And the unconscious, though hidden, is not passive. It shapes your life behind your back. It chooses your lovers, your enemies, your compulsions. Until you bring it into the light, you are not free. You are acted through without knowing by what. To individuate is to end this unconscious possession. It is to stop being a puppet of repressed parts and become the author of your inner myth. It requires confrontation, courage, radical honesty. You must meet your shadow without flinching. You must feel the parts of yourself you have long judged, feared, or denied. Not to destroy them, but to welcome them back, the angry one, the seducer, the coward, the manipulator, the one who wants to run, the one who wants to burn it all down. They are not your enemies. They are your forgotten allies, your disowned strengths. Their rawness must be refined, not erased. This is the inner alchemy, the transmutation of chaos into character, instinct into insight, wound into wisdom. And in the crucible of that alchemy, something ancient begins to rise. Not your ego, but your essence. The self, the center, the quiet sun behind the storm of thoughts. It does not shout, it radiates, it does not demand. It draws you in, like gravity, and the closer you move to it, the more you feel both terror and truth, because to follow the self means death. The death of the false, of the borrowed identities, of the masks that once kept you safe, but now keep you small. But on the other side of that death is resurrection. Not into perfection, but into presence, into authenticity, into the strange sacred wholeness of being fully yourself. Not the version that pleases others, the version that burns with soul, the truth you're not ready to hear. You were not born free. You were born into a script written long before you ever spoke your first word. The moment you arrived, the world began to carve its symbols into your skin. Parental expectations, cultural myths, inherited traumas, and silent laws that whispered what you must be to be loved. And you obeyed. You smiled when you were supposed to. You shrank when they demanded it. You wore the mask they gave you, until one day you forgot it was a mask at all. This is the truth that you were never ready to hear. The life you call yours is a performance. The self you present is a carefully crafted illusion. And the real you, the raw, untamed, divine force buried beneath years of conditioning, has yet to speak its first true word. But the unconscious remembers, it never forgets the cries. You silenced the rage you buried, the dreams you abandoned to become acceptable. And now it stirs beneath your everyday life, pressing through dreams, symptoms, moods, and compulsions, begging for you to turn inward, to listen, to remember. The unconscious is not a void. It is a world, a realm of forgotten gods and forsaken truths. It is the cave you fear to enter. And inside it dwells the parts of yourself you rejected to survive. The liar, the thief, the coward, the tyrant, the child who was never held, the monster you swore you'd never become. This darkness is not evil. It is exiled potential. Every trait you were told was shameful. Aggression, sensuality, ambition, sorrow was not destroyed, only repressed. And now they live in your shadow. The shadow is the guardian of your buried gold. It contains everything that was once alive in you, but deemed unfit for the light. The more you deny it, the more power it gathers in silence. It leaks through your tone, your fears, your addictions. It sabotages your goals and projects its face onto others. You see it in your enemies, not realizing you are only seeing yourself. You were taught to be good, not whole. But goodness without wholeness is a lie that rots the soul. Wholeness requires confrontation. It demands that you look into the mirror and see not the curated mask, but the fractured God within the chaos and the cosmos. To look into the eyes of your own shadow is to kneel at the altar of your rebirth. And this is where most turn away. Because it hurts, it burns, it strips away everything that ever made you feel secure. But transformation is not a gentle process. It is fire. It is dismemberment. It is death. And yet from this death arises something eternal. Not your persona, the social fiction you've mastered, but yourself, the deep, sacred center of your being that has waited patiently for you to return. The self does not speak in logic. It speaks in symbols, dreams, synchronicities. It lures you with strange patterns, repeating wounds, mystical encounters. Every time you feel lost, betrayed, broken, it is the self calling you home, through the crack in your identity. The wound is not a punishment, it is the doorway. And your suffering is not an accident, it is initiation, the descent into confusion, depression, anxiety, that is not failure. That is the call to the underworld, the ancient rite of soul-making. The ego resists it, clings to the known. But something deeper in you knows something primal, mythic. You feel it when you stare too long at the stars, or when your heart breaks in a way that language cannot contain. That is the self-awakening. That is the sacred within you, rising to reclaim its throne. But to awaken the self, you must first shatter the false king, the ego. The ego is not your enemy, but it is not your master either. It is the center of consciousness, but not the center of your being. When the ego believes itself to be the whole, you suffer. You begin to curate life, to maintain an image. You fear death because you believe you are only the surface, but you are not. You are the ocean, pretending to be the wave. And when the wave breaks, only then do you remember your vastness. Death, symbolic or literal, is not the end. It is the return. And so, every spiritual awakening begins with a fall, a betrayal, a rupture. This is not a mistake. This is archetypal. It is the hero's journey, not just in myth, but within your very psyche. You are called to descend, not into some heavenly light, but into the womb of the unconscious, into the depths where the monsters live, into the cave where your treasure sleeps. The dragon you fear is not outside of you. It is the part of you that was never loved. And until you face it, it will guard your gold. This is the eternal pattern. The hero must slay or befriend the beast. But in truth, there is no slaying only integration. You do not destroy your shadow, you dialogue with it. You give it form name, meaning you give it a voice. And in doing so, you become more than human. You become whole. The split between light and dark begins to close. The inner war softens, and from the union of opposites, something new is born, inner alchemy. This is the sacred work, to transmute fear into wisdom, rage into strength, grief into compassion, lust into creativity. You do not kill the dark parts of yourself. You consecrate them. You bring them to the altar and say, even this is part of me, and this is the path of individuation, and the slow, painful, magnificent journey of becoming who you truly are, not who the world told you to be, not who your trauma shaped you into, but the one who was buried beneath the noise. The self is not found through striving. It is revealed through surrender, through deep listening, through dissent, and through silence. You will not find it in the applause nor in the mirror of public image. You will find it in the places you were taught to avoid. The lonely places, the The wild places, the places that make you tremble. The self emerges when you have nothing left to prove and everything left to feel. And when you stand in its presence, you remember who you were before the world named you. You remember the sacred wound. You remember the myth you were born to live, the cost of not growing up. There is a quiet tragedy unfolding all around you. It does not scream. It does not bleed. It walks beside you in silence, in boardrooms, bedrooms, families, governments. It wears adult skin, speaks adult words, plays adult roles. But beneath the surface lies a child who never grew up. Not a child in wonder. Not a child in innocence, but a child frozen in time, terrified of pain, allergic to responsibility, addicted to comfort. And this is the cost of not growing up a life built on illusion, relationships poisoned by projection. A society that worships convenience over character. You may age, you may learn, you may succeed. But if you do not confront the parts of you that remain undeveloped, untouched by time, you will sabotage everything you build, because maturity is not a number. It is the integration of the broken inner world you carry with you. It is the courage to face the wounds that shaped you and the archetypes that inhabit your unconscious. Until you do, you will confuse freedom with indulgence, power with control, love with possession, and you will suffer. To grow up is to die, not a physical death, but the symbolic death of the child's dream, that someone will come to rescue you. It is to bury the fantasy that life will be fair, that your needs will be met without cost, that someone else will carry your burden. Growing up means turning inward and meeting the orphan within the part of you abandoned long ago, perhaps when your cries were ignored, or your truth was shamed, or your magic was ridiculed. That orphan still waits. It waits in your loneliness, your addictions, your rage, your need for validation. And it will continue to wait until you descend into the darkness, to find it, to sit with it, to listen without flinching. Because it remembers everything you chose to forget. The unconscious stores every memory, every feeling, every betrayal you never processed. And until you reclaim it, it will control your life from the shadows. You will think you are making choices, but the truth is, you will be reenacting old scripts driven by ancient wounds. You will be seduced by partners who echo your parents, drawn to suffering that feels familiar, avoiding growth that feels like death. The world will reflect back the parts of yourself you refuse to see, and you will call it fate. But it is not fate. It is your shadow begging to be seen. The shadow of the eternal child, the poor eternus, who wants to play forever, who resents limits, who flees when things get hard. And yet this child is not evil. It is simply lost, immature, uninitiated. It needs guidance, not indulgence. It needs a strong, integrated adult self to contain it. But most have no such self. They have personas. Masks worn so well, they forget who they are without them. The persona is necessary to survive. It helps you function, adapt, be seen. But it is not the truth of who you are. It is the role you play. The well-behaved mask you learn to wear so others wouldn't leave. But behind it, a storm brews. The parts of you that weren't allowed to exist never died. They were exiled. And now they live in your unconscious, waiting to erupt, and they will. In midlife crises, in broken marriages, in unexplained rage, in the quiet despair that seeps in when success no longer satisfies, this is not a glitch. It is the soul calling for wholeness. When the persona cracks, the unconscious floods in, and that flood can drown you or it can baptize you. But only if you are willing to descend, only if you are ready to take responsibility for your own becoming. Maturity is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to hold emotion without collapse. It is to feel grief without becoming it. to feel fear and still move forward, to love without possession, to speak truth without cruelty. It is the conscious union of opposites of strength and tenderness, action and stillness, reason and instinct. And this union can only happen through the process Jung called individuation, a sacred path, a lifelong journey. A psychological pilgrimage that requires you to become whole, not perfect. It demands that you integrate every part of yourself, the light and the dark, the noble and the shameful, the divine and the wounded. To individuate is to step off the well-lit path and enter the forest alone, to seek not approval, but authenticity, not pleasure but purpose. And it is a path very few dare to walk, because growth hurts. It means letting go of who you thought you were. It means facing the guilt of the unlived life, the regret of wasted time, the pain of becoming responsible for your own suffering. But on the other side is something sacred, a self that is rooted, grounded, capable of standing in the storm without losing center, a self that does not need to dominate or submit because it knows its own depth. This is not found in books. It is not found in titles. It is forged in the fire of inner work, in dreams that break you open, in relationships that mirror your shadow, in moments of silence when the soul finally speaks. And what it says may terrify you because it does not care about your comfort. It only cares about your wholeness. And wholeness demands sacrifice. You must give up the need to be liked, the addiction to certainty, the fantasy of rescue. You must give up the story that your pain is someone else's fault. You must give up the idea that you are a victim of life. These lies are the chains that keep you a child. They are comforting, but they are prison bars. And so to grow up is to break those chains, not with violence, but with awareness, with humility, with brutal honesty about your own limitations, and with compassion, not the soft, sentimental kind, but the fierce compassion that holds you accountable to your potential, that demands you rise, not because the world owes you something, but because the world needs you awake. And you cannot be awake if you are still waiting for someone else to do the work for you.